It began with the sound. Soft, subtle, almost nothing. Not a cry, not a whisper. Just a faint scraping like fingernails brushing slowly across dry wood. It came from beneath the floorboards, too deliberate to be pipes, too rhythmic to be rats. At first, no one mentioned it. They all heard it, but silence seemed safer than acknowledgement. The construction site had stood quiet for weeks before that sound arrived. A private plot just outside a forgotten town, surrounded by overgrown brush and pine trees that grew too close together. There was a constant overcast haze that refused to lift, even when the sun should have burned it off by noon. Birds didn't nest in the trees there. Animals avoided the dirt. The place had a hum in the air, a weight pressing into the chest that deepened with every hour on site. The house they were building wasn't extravagant, 2 floors. An attic, no basement. The plans had been submitted by a woman no one really knew, Mrs. Ashcroft, pale, silent, always dressed in black lace and dark gloves. She paid in full before the first brick was laid and insisted on 2 things: no mirrors anywhere and absolute precision to the blueprints. 12 rooms. Exactly 12. And yet, on the 11th day of construction, the foreman stood frozen in the hallway, staring at the architectural scans. He ran his hand down the drywall, then turned slowly to the others, his mouth open to speak, but no words came out, because there was a 13th room, a full room, floor, ceiling, walls, but no door, no windows, no handles, no break in the surface. Just a solid, silent box encased in the center of the home. No entrance, no exit, and no logical reason for its existence. The blueprints were wrong, or worse. Something had changed them. They tried to rationalize. Maybe a miscalculation, a misprint, an error in framing. But the measurements were clean. No space had been lost elsewhere. The room was real. Even the thermal scans picked up the hollow cavity within. They tapped the walls. Solid, dead, still. The silence inside that space was different. It didn't feel like emptiness. It felt like watching, as if the air inside had never been stirred, never breathed, never touched by time. The workers nicknamed it the blind room, then the room with no door. At first, they laughed, made uneasy jokes. But the laughter didn't last. Not when the scraping started again, now louder, closer, sometimes at night, sometimes in the middle of conversations. A low, dragging sound from behind the drywall. Then the cold spots appeared, not in the entire house, just near the sealed room. A sudden drop in temperature, heavy enough to turn breath visible and make tools freeze to the touch. The insulation crew swore they had already sealed everything. No explanation made sense. Soon, the accidents began. A carpenter lost 2 fingers when his saw blade jumped. A roofer slipped and broke his leg in 4 places. A heavy beam collapsed from the 2nd floor without warning and missed a worker by inches. And Theo, the youngest of the crew, suffered a seizure just outside the sealed wall. When he woke, he sobbed uncontrollably, insisting someone had whispered his name from inside the room. That night, Theo packed his tools and left. He never came back. 2 weeks later, his car was found totaled on a narrow road miles away, wrapped around a tree. The ignition was off. The keys were still in his pocket, but there were no skid marks, no blood, no footprints in the fresh snow. The room remained untouched. And yet it breathed. It didn't make sound in the usual way. It made presence, a low hum in the gut, a pressure behind the eyes. One by one, the crew began taking longer breaks, stepping outside to smoke more often, muttering under their breath. They complained of migraines, nausea, and restless dreams. They spoke of the room without naming it. They avoided standing too close to its walls. And no one dared to knock again. Mrs. Ashcroft returned only once after the 13th room appeared. She glided through the halls in silence, veil drawn, gloves tighter than before. She paused near the sealed wall, as if hearing something on the other side. Her lips parted slightly, but she said nothing, just nodded, satisfied, and handed the foreman a white envelope. She never returned after that. Inside the envelope was a short note written in looping cursive: Chor, do not alter it. Leave it untouched. The house is complete, but the house wasn't complete because something in that room remained unfinished, unspoken, buried. The longer the structure stood, the more unnatural it felt. Plaster began to crack in strange lines, like veins crawling across the surface. Nails turned rust-colored within days. The wallpaper in the adjoining hallway began to blister and peel, always in the shape of long vertical slashes. And beneath the floorboards, the sound shifted from scraping to breathing. It was slow at first, faint, barely noticeable, but it had rhythm, intent, a deep, exhaling cadence, like something was waiting, gathering itself just behind the wall. Sometimes they said it mimicked them. Repeated voices, echoed names. One worker claimed he heard his deceased wife calling to him from inside. Another woke in the middle of the night and swore he saw a handprint pressed from within the drywall. No one wanted to admit it aloud, but they all began to feel the same thing, that the room hadn't been built, it had been uncovered, something long hidden, something never meant to be touched again. And in their blind pursuit of blueprints and cement, they had reawakened it. The door had never been forgotten. It had been sealed on purpose. And whatever had been sealed inside was starting to remember. Time passed. The house stood in silence at the edge of the woods, wrapped in fog and layered in dust. Seasons changed around it, but nothing changed inside. No tenants, no caretakers, no curious buyers, just stillness. A stillness that watched. They tried to sell it, of course. The realtors repainted, refloored, even staged it with artificial warmth, lamps that glowed too bright, fake flowers in vases, the illusion of life. But nothing lived there long. The contractors refused to return. The inspectors left early. Even the photos never turned out right. Rooms came out warped, shadowed, as if the angles didn't belong to this world. The hallway near the sealed room always appeared twice in the pictures, as if the house had folded onto itself. The neighborhood whispered. They said the house was cursed, said it had been built on bones, said the woman who commissioned it had died long before the foundation was ever poured. Some even said the house wasn't built at all, that it had grown like a tumor of memory erupting from the earth, feeding on the grief of those who stepped inside. But only the room remained consistent. The 13th room, still without a door, still exhaling something ancient, still listening. 2. Erica Vale was the first to break the silence. She moved in during winter, alone and smiling. A photographer by trade, drawn to isolation and character. Houses with scars, she called them. The realtor offered it cheap. Too cheap? Erica accepted immediately. She didn't care about the rumors until the first night. That was when she heard the knocking. It came at 3:12 a.m., precise as a clock. One knock, then silence, then 2 knocks, then 3. From within the wall, she thought it was plumbing at first, or an animal trapped behind the structure. But each night the knocks returned, always the same time, always a beat longer. By the 6th night, they had formed a pattern, a rhythm, a message. She began to record them, listened to them backwards, slowed them down, layered them on top of one another. The pattern wasn't random, it was language. Old, coded, desperate, open-it. The voice was never loud. It didn't need to be. It lived in her now. In the corners of her eyes, in the shadows beneath the staircase, in the mirror she caught herself avoiding. It didn't scream. It sang. She stopped eating. She stopped sleeping. She stood for hours near the sealed wall, pressing her hand against the cold surface, whispering to something that answered in silence. When the neighbors brought her food, she left it to rot on the porch. When her sister came to check on her, Erica stared blankly and muttered, "It knows my name now." The scratching returned on the 10th night. This time it traced words. Long, thin gashes appeared on the wallpaper outside the room. marks that formed letters in an alphabet no one recognized, symbols that vibrated in the skull just from looking at them. They pulsed like veins, like something was growing on the other side. And then came the windows. One morning, the neighbors awoke to see every window in the house smeared with writing, chalky red, brown strokes across the glass. L-E-S-E-E-Y-U. By the third week, Erica had removed every tool she could find, hammers, saws, drills. She became obsessed with access. She tore up the floors, pried open the walls. She ripped away insulation and wiring and nails piece by piece, until she found the original layer of drywall that sealed the room. She stood there for hours, staring, breathing, whispering. When they finally took her away, she was found crouched beneath the floorboards, weeping, her hands covered in splinters and blood. Her fingernails had been torn away from digging. She clutched a single piece of drywall in her lap and kept repeating the same sentence in a low, trembling voice. There's someone inside, and they remember me. The room never opened, but it didn't need to. Because once the door is inside you, once the whisper finds the weak place in your mind, it follows you everywhere. That's the horror. Not the house, not the room, but the memory of it. Others tried to live there, short-term tenants, flippers, out-of-town speculators, but none of them stayed. One man suffered a nervous breakdown after 36 hours. Another claimed he saw a woman dancing in the shadows of the hallway, dancing with no feet, no face, no skin, her hands folded across her chest as if in prayer. A couple moved in during spring and left before the week ended, screaming that the walls moved when they weren't looking. And always behind every account, the same detail. The voice, never loud, never angry, just waiting. It spoke differently to each of them. It used memory like bait. It spoke in the voice of dead mothers, forgotten lovers, long vanished pets. It sang lullabies no one had heard since childhood. It repeated sentences that had once ended relationships. It knew where to wound. One tenant reported hearing music late at night. A soft, dissonant melody coming from behind the sealed wall. He recorded it on his phone, played it back at half speed, and discovered it wasn't music at all. It was breathing, layered, inhuman, as if a choir of lungs was exhaling a name no one remembered. And then there were the drawings. Children in the nearby school began sketching strange things during class, shapes that resembled rooms without doors, with long shadows that reached through the cracks. One boy carved a message into his desk with a compass. "She's still inside." When asked who she was, he only smiled, the one who forgot her face. The house is mostly silent now, left to rot, its foundation cracking, vines crawling up the walls. The street it's on has been rezoned for demolition, but the house never appears on the paperwork. It's as if it's been excluded by something higher, something older, something watching, but still the whisper lingers. In dreams, in reflective surfaces, in voices that repeat behind the ear when no one else is home. The room does not need a door anymore, because the whisper found a way out. And now it finds those who are fractured, those who carry regret, those with open wounds in the soul. The whisper doesn't scream, it remembers. And that is the most terrifying thing of all. Years passed. The house remained standing like a scar on the landscape, unclaimed, unbothered, untouched. Wind scraped across its shutters. Dust thickened along its windows. And inside, behind plaster and wire and insulation, the room still waited, sealed, lightless, empty. Yet it wasn't quiet. No longer, because the room had learned patience. No one spoke of opening it anymore. No one dared approach the wall. The locals avoided the street entirely, crossing themselves or muttering prayers when they passed. The city council condemned the property, but demolition was mysteriously delayed again and again. The permits were denied for clerical errors no one could trace. The contractors refused to touch it. Even the homeless wouldn't squat inside. Everyone agreed something lived there now, or rather something had become, and then came Dr. Isaac Marlowe, a scholar of ancient theology, discredited by his peers, obsessed with forbidden architecture. His lectures were filled with grim diagrams, apocryphal texts, and warnings spoken in dead tongues. He believed some structures were not built for shelter, but for binding. Not to keep things out, but to keep something in. He called them womb of memory, rooms that did not age, that did not rot, spaces that were not crafted by hand, but formed through ritual, through pain, through repetition. Rooms that became vessels for unspeakable things, shadows made from guilt, grief-given form, voices that refused to be forgotten. He found the house by accident, or maybe the house found him. He moved in during the fall, alone, no ceremony, no warnings. The locals watched from a distance as he wheeled in boxes full of tomes, symbols, black candles, and ancient maps that referenced structures never marked on any official survey. The 13th room fascinated him. He took thermal images. He mapped the shape with LiDAR. He tested the electromagnetic fields around the wall and found the readings fractured, as though time itself stuttered near its edges. One night, a camera captured Marlowe standing perfectly still in front of the sealed wall for over 6 hours, unmoving, unblinking. In the final 30 seconds, he raised his hand and placed it gently on the surface. The lights flickered, the wall pulsed, and in the footage, for just a moment, the outline of a face appeared, pressed from the inside, not screaming, just smiling. The final pages of Marlowe's journal were found scattered throughout the house. Ink soaked into the wood, notes scratched into mirrors, phrases etched into skin, toned wax, and nailed to door frames. Chua, she was never buried, just forgotten. I hear her breathing now, not through the wall, through me. Chua, she remembers the first lie, the first silence. The first name taken. Chor Chaw, the door isn't real. It's a mercy. Chaw, and mercy is not what she wants. Neighbors began reporting strange events again. Static rippling across televisions. Phones ringing at 3:12 a.m., only to emit the sound of wet breathing. Children waking with strange symbols drawn on their arms in ash. Dogs howling in the same pattern as the knocks from years ago. And dreams, so many dreams of the house. But the dreams always ended the same way, a lightless room, a slow spinning sound, like a carousel with no music. And a woman in the center, dancing in a way the human body was never meant to move. Face turned away, hands nailed into her own chest, smiling. When the authorities finally breached the house again, they found it abandoned. Every surface scrawled with language not known to any living culture. Every mirror blackened. Every nail twisted to face inward. And in the heart of the house, the sealed wall was no longer untouched. There was no door still, but the wall had changed. It breathed now. Slow, rhythmic expansions and contractions, as if the drywall had become lungs. Or flesh. The texture had changed too. No longer smooth plaster. It rippled faintly under light. Moisture formed on its surface, and if someone placed their ear to it, God help them, they didn't just hear breathing, they heard mourning. A long, low wail of memory, not rage, not despair, but betrayal, the kind that runs older than language, older than guilt. They sealed the house in chain and concrete, poured salt across the foundation, and declared it unfit for human entry. But the room didn't stay there, because the room was never just a place. It was an idea. And once an idea takes root in a wounded mind, it spreads. Now, it appears elsewhere. Not whole, but in fragments. A sound in the corner of a church confessional. A voice whispering behind a hospital wall. A shape seen just beyond a mirror that doesn't cast your reflection properly. In dark hotels with rooms that don't show up on the reservation list, in closets that feel bigger than they are, in dreams that turn realer than waking. The room follows the ones who listen, the ones who hear the knocking, The ones who stare at the same corner of their ceiling each night, wondering what memory has nested in their silence. The door was never physical. It was emotional. It was spiritual. And now it opens in those who carry unspoken grief, in those who buried someone too soon, in those who regret, who obsess, who remember things they never should have seen. The door opens inward. Some say Marlowe never left the house. Others believe he became part of the room, merged with it, swallowed, rewritten. His face appears in dreams now, not as a warning, but as an invitation. The woman who dances still waits barefoot in the dark, spinning slowly in a room no one built. Her skin cracked, stitched in prayers. Her eyes, when she finally turns, are not eyes at all. They are mirrors. And when you see your own reflection in them, it's already too late. Because if she sees you, if the room recognizes you, it means the door has opened, and something has already stepped through. Some rooms are not meant to be opened. They are meant to be remembered. And the room they built without a door remembers you.